Hello and welcome. I'm Kate.
And I'm Emily, and this is Beyond the Neurotype,
A podcast that explores what it's like to be human affirming, regardless of labels, considerate of every person's individual needs, and allowing us to, ideally, understand what is behind every individual's actions, choices, and needs.
We do this with curiosity and love as we explore these individual and unique experiences that are rich with challenges, growth, and grace.
I'm Kate, a mental health social worker and synergetic play therapist. I'm the co-founder of the Village Therapy Hub. I'm a mum to 2 adolescents, and I love understanding and exploring what is happening beneath the surface for children and adults, and what behaviours are communicating to us. But let me keep it real. Much like yours, my life is a roller coaster. So I also understand the complexities of being a carer, the challenges of the day-to-day, and I won't pretend it's all enjoyable.
I'm Emily, a neurodivergent mum to a beautiful autistic girl and wife to a wonderful autistic man. I'm passionate about celebrating neurodiversity and creating a community where people are seen, held, and loved for who they truly are. It is my hope that as you listen to the stories of our beautiful guests, you feel inspired, validated, and supported in your journey.
This podcast is recorded on the land of the Dja Dja Wurrung people. We offer our heartfelt gratitude to the traditional custodians and elders, past, present, and emerging, for continued opportunities to learn, reflect, and grow. Hello, this is very exciting. So for everyone to know, after a episode with a conversation with a guest, Emily and I are going to jump on and we're going to have a reflection conversation. And we have so many thoughts and feelings after these podcast recordings that this is actually a really exciting time for us to get to deeper dive into some of the things that our guests have talked about and the impact they've had on us. And so first up today, let's maybe go back a bit and talk about, Emily, why did we decide to do this podcast?
Hello. It's been a really interesting journey. Getting to do this podcast, it's been the most amazing journey. So you and I obviously met about 8 years ago through a singing group, and we've always had this really lovely connection, and our whole group has this really lovely connection. But yeah, over the past few months, I was really going through a tough time with my family and my daughter, and during that tough time, you were really there for me, and another friend in that group were really there for me, and we were talking a lot about ideas and ways to support. And you and I went out for dinner, and that dinner I just left feeling like, oh, I just wish I could bottle you. Bottle everything you were saying, because so much of it has just been it was so helpful to me in that really, really tough period that we had. And so I think that's where the little spark was, and I was looking for something. I was looking to find a way that I could have a project to help support other families in our situation, and try and share what I've learned along our journey, and create community. And so I sent you a message, and I just felt like I'd been struck one day. I had 2 ideas, and the first idea was something which I won't share, but it was quite radical and pretty out there. And the other idea was to start a podcast. And and you chose number 2.
Yep. I wondered whether I had the energy for number 1. It felt like a really big job, and I thought, I don't know if I'm there in terms of capacity right now.
Which I wasn't either, but
But I'd had this idea that I'd had for a little while that I hadn't shared with anybody about creating a podcast. And it was on my, whiteboard where I dump all my ideas. And so when you came forward with this suggestion, I thought, well, okay, maybe this is the moment for the podcast. I'm also very inclined to take on new projects at the end of the year and beginning of the year. It seems that there's more space in my world in that time. So you got me at the exact right moment. And it has proven to be the absolute right decision. We have already recorded a number of our conversations, and it has taken both of us down this incredible path. We keep talking about it as cracking us open. And every conversation has prompted us to think about something, reflect on something, learn something. And I actually just can't wait to get them all out and for everyone to hear them all.
Yeah, it's been a pretty, and most of them were done over that Christmas, New Year, no man's period where we had some space and time, and we've just smashed out and it's just been, the most incredible experience actually during that time. You've got time away from work to be able to reflect on what we're talking about, and this crazy 2-week kind of therapy retreat from our computers. But spoken to some amazing people and really excited to share what they have to say.
Yeah. And I think it's beautiful that part of your why about doing this was wanting other families to get to experience your experiences through you, and in that know that they're not alone, and that that others have similar struggles. And often when we're struggling, we feel like we're the only ones, and we feel like there's no end to it, and we are completely alone. And I've been having conversations this week with people who feel like if they were to tell anyone what they were struggling with, they would be judged, or people would think something of them or question who they are as a parent. And the reality is, I've had that conversation multiple times with multiple people this week. So that alone proves that we have similar struggles. Yes, our stories are not all exactly the same, but there is very similar themes to our challenges.
And I know that I'm judged for some of the ways that I do things, and my thoughts on, my take on parenting has, out of necessity changed quite significantly from what's normal, but our life isn't, what's normal. And but I suppose normal? What is normal? But I suppose because now I'm so strong in my why, it's kind of I'm not so afraid of being judged now. That kind of this isn't for that. This is, for other people that are struggling to find their path, and it's certainly not from a place of, oh, look at me, because we don't have it sorted at all, but we're moving in a path that feels better. So
do you think that you feel less impacted by the judgments when you can see that it feels good and it's working within your family structure?
Absolutely.
And so there's like this deep knowingness that this actually is okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And the people that judge, they don't know the full extent of what's going on or your story, or they might think that I'm really lax with parenting and boundaries and discipline and things like that. They don't understand what's actually going on behind that, and that I need to look at behavior as communication, and I try and use the behavior and any maybe behaviors that are less desirable, try to see that as, oh, she's trying to tell me something, she's not happy, and find the root cause. And I know that that's quite, it can be quite different, and it's a challenge. But it's the improvement we've had since implementing that and changing from a traditional kind of method is vastly outweighs any yeah, any criticism or what anyone could say, because I see the evidence is in your child's well-being. So nothing's going to take you away from that.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said about behavior being communication, which is totally a big piece for me as well. And I stop and think when people are judging me, what's that behavior communicating? Are they
Mm.
feeling a bit inadequate in their own world? Are they feeling overwhelmed in their own parenting? Is there things that inform their need to try and look more capable than me? Often that's communication as well. And so when we can kind of see all of that through that lens, sometimes it gives us an empathy that they don't even know they need.
And I think being forced to comply, a lot of
Mm.
the time, and I, see this in myself, like when you feel like you're being forced to comply with a certain line and a certain way of doing things, and you're doing it because you have to, and then all of a sudden you see someone, oh, actually, I don't have to. It's quite confronting, because then you're questioning why you're doing it.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
definitely. So, yeah, which is probably a nice little way to segue into our first episode, which has launched last week. Our baby is out there. And so we started off. I am not naturally one that likes to speak. So I thought, to do this a bit more easily, I'll start with my husband, because that was a great idea to make things easier on me. Not so yeah, been really a bit nervous to share this one, but it was a really lovely conversation, and
It
yeah.
was. And a conversation that I found really intriguing. There were so many parts to the conversation with Mike and yourself because it ended up being the two of you talking about all the things that I just felt so connected to in terms of like particularly managing relationship dynamics.
Mhm.
I think every couple experiences challenges around navigating dynamics. And as we step into a world where we become more aware of neurotypes, there is a greater capacity for knowing someone in a different way, or knowing or seeking to understand someone as they really are, rather than we've really moved away from, gender roles and, well, I hope we're moving further and further away from it, but it's no longer that a woman does this and a man does this. We're working towards sharing roles in homes and starting to do that through a lens of what my brain needs.
Yeah, 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 and that's been something that's been, yeah, a big shift for us, and it's still um and I feel like maybe our conversation presented a bit with the rose tinted glasses as well. um, it's not easy, and it's continual hard, sometimes really hard work to try and find a way where each of us have our needs met when we are such different people and have such different needs. And I think we talked a bit about the loss of the fantasy. Sometimes I still really want that fantasy, and
Yeah.
it's finding, yeah, the parts that are really important to me, and trying to find a way um to keep that, because I don't want to just dismiss the whole fantasy and of what I wanted for my life and throw it out the window, and, oh well, this is how it is. It's you know got to be careful of doing that too. So yeah, it's a real up and down. And when I first watched that recording back, it really made me think about some of the things that I said, and um, you know, how much do I really feel that every day? And yeah, it's a real balancing.
Yeah, because that's the reality is that we can change our perception of things or how we feel about something on the regular, like we can one day have a perspective that's based on everything we know up until that day or how that day's going, our level of safety in that day, what our experience of everything in our world that day, and then it can be different the next. And gosh, that makes relationships hard because we're both in our individuals journeys while doing that as a partnership. I'm not someone that does relationships well. I'm very aware of that. I don't have a great history of relationships lasting. And so I have a lot of respect for people that seem to be able to hold it together through the challenges, as well as the good bits. But there are lots of challenges.
Well, I feel like you do relationships very well because I love my 8-year friendship with you, and that is a relationship. So I don't know if that's fair to say, but yeah, I don't know if I don't admire people that have held on for a long time as much as I used to now. Because I've seen couples that have held on and maybe would have been better off actually not holding on and living much happier separate lives. And but the fear of the unknown, or and Mike and I've been together for 20 years this year, and there's a lot that's at stake. So it's kind of when the chips are down and there's tough conversations or what have you, it's like, well, yeah, it's a lot to lose. So then it makes you dig that bit deeper to try and find, a way to pull it out of the bag or what have you. But
also incredible to have shared your growth with someone from like being a teenager all the way to your 30s. Like,
I was actually 13 when we first met, which is crazy. Yeah. We got together the 2 days before my 15th birthday. So yeah, it's a lot. And you're going through your teenage years and the mistakes that you make in a relationship. And yeah, we haven't both of us haven't always been the nicest to each other and done things that maybe we regret. And and the growth isn't linear, and our growth hasn't been linear. And so one of us will be working on something independently and have a big jump in emotional growth or a big change, and then the others kind of got to slowly get there as well. So that's uncomfortable when you're in different places. So it's definitely not a
Gosh, it's a lot of, and I talk about how powerful this is, but it's a lot of sitting in the shit. And what I like to say is that shit is the best fertilizer that there is. And so the more we can sit in it, the stronger we grow. And what you're describing is a whole lot of sitting in the shit. And we avoid it. We avoid the shit. We want to get out of, I don't know if I can be saying that word, but I'm going to.
I think
we avoid
it. We can.
Our podcast, our rules. We avoid that because it's uncomfortable, and we avoid it in lots of areas of our lives. Our kids are struggling, work's hard, our relationship's difficult. We have, we're stepped into exercise and our muscles hurt, like whatever it is. We have these times all the time because the reality is that growth actually hurts and you have to sit in the shit to grow. And so that is yuck and mucky.
Yeah. And as long as, it is like fertilizer and you're not sitting in a sewer. So you need some sunlight as well.
Okay. I like that. Thank you. And I had someone say to me recently, oh, we go to couples therapy and we just throw the shit at each other.
Oh, yes. We're trying not to do that.
There's all kinds of ways this shit can work.
Yes, we are trying not to throw shit at each other so much now. Um, and yeah, I think our communication has grown so much and around our daughter's diagnosis and just, yeah, both of us accepting and trying to that process that we've embraced with our daughter of having to um, accept her and just love her and find a way to communicate with her that suits her. Yeah, then extrapolating that out into our relationship with each other has only just made our communication a lot better. Yeah, and yeah, but it's a journey.
It is absolutely an ongoing journey. So, some of the things that I really loved that Mike talked about were in reflection of the experience of getting your daughter diagnosed and how that helped him to see his own neurotype for what it was, but also probably see it as more of a welcome piece of information
Yeah.
than he might have if your daughter hadn't have had the process of being diagnosed.
Mm.
And I think that's really interesting because we do talk about that neurotypes are often genetic. And what we're seeing more and more now is that parents are getting diagnosed after their children.
Mm-hmm.
And I've certainly witnessed a lot of experiences of people, of parents resisting wanting to get their children diagnosed who actually just don't have any insight into their own potential diagnosis.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's about, I don't want my kid to get diagnosed because then potentially there'll be a label for me that I don't want. So it's a really complex thing, this idea that sometimes, well, we're all seeing ourselves through our kids. That's what parenting is. But that
Yeah.
then when the child goes through the process of a diagnosis and gets given this label, that could make parenting even harder.
Yeah. And I grapple with this a lot. And so for myself, I've never gone down. I identify broadly as neurodivergent. I think that's pretty clear. But I I grapple with I don't really care about a label for myself other than that. Um, for my daughter, it was really important because the label gave us access to support.
Mm.
And but ideally, yeah, I still don't know how much I love the labels. Like,
Mm.
we're all just neurotypes. We're all our own individual person. And ideally, I would love for everyone, autistic, ADHD, whatever diagnosis, label, identity, I would just love for everyone to have access to the support that they need and be able to live the lives that they need to live. And then there wouldn't be this need for labels. The
Mm.
labels only required because our very narrow way of living and the way society functions suits. I don't really know who it suits because most people I talk to
Yeah, it
struggle with
doesn't
it.
suit.
But it's one. It suits businesses, I guess. It's one way of doing things, and everyone has to fit into that way of doing things. And yeah.
Yeah, yes. I find it astounding the way that society has formed and began this process of this is how we do things and everyone just accepts that. And I know it's happened over really long periods of time. And so I'm sure over a really long period of time, if I had a particular thought I was trying to drive home or a particular way I wanted someone to do something, and I just like slowly gave it to them on repeat in little bits, then eventually they would follow what I wanted them to do. Oh, is that parenting? Um, but yeah, we all have just kind of got to this place. And actually, I think that we stepped into a space of labels being something people did want for a while, a few years ago, because boxes help us feel safe. And we wanted to be able to
Mm,
put people into categories. And then through doing that, people started to actually think more about who they were as individuals. And so then it started to kind of seep out. And now we hear people talk about, oh God, everyone's getting diagnosed, or, everyone thinks they're neurodivergent. Well, maybe that's a question about how much have we been acting as individuals versus how much have we been conforming to the way we've been prescribed to act. And perhaps now, for whatever reason, people are starting to be more of their individual self, or starting to notice more of who they are. Because I do know, like for me, when after being in a state of chronic stress for a long time, the kind of coming out of that felt like I was having a mental breakdown, and I started to question everything about who I was and how I acted and how I thought about things. And I really felt for a period of time that I was just losing my mind. And actually, it was a questioning for me about whether the me pre-stress had been highly masking, and then post-stress couldn't maintain the same level of fake, pretend, conformity. So
Yeah.
I think it's a really interesting journey that we're all on as individuals, about starting to wonder more about, like, who am I and what do I actually want, and how do I actually want to do that, and why?
Yeah, absolutely. And our lives are just getting busier and busier, um and more things that we're kind of, and especially as women, expected to, where now it's almost impossible to survive financially if you're not both working. If you're in a, husband and wife couple and have children, you both need to be out there working. And but then often the woman also has a lot of the burden of the mental load and things like that. And we're definitely starting to see some shift there in gender roles and things, but that we're just so, yeah, trying to be 100% at parenting, 100% in our and fulfilled in our work lives, and maintain a social life, maintain your fitness and your health, and
No wonder I'm exhausted.
and everyone's just exhausted. And I think, yeah, we're really talking more about our mental health, and, we have access to the internet now to communicate with people that we wouldn't have otherwise been able to share this stuff with as well. The internet's been a huge part in me being able to identify that my daughter was autistic and then connect with other people. And yeah, and that's where going back to labels, that labels can be helpful because it helps you find your neurokid, to use that term. You finding other people in the same boat as you. But yeah, and so I think we're all connecting more and more that, like, it's just not working for us. Got to do something a bit different.
Yeah. And that reminds me of something Mike talked about when he was talking about trying to read self-help books to be a better, better dad, partner, all the things,
Person in general. Yeah.
person in general. And that reading those books actually made him feel less capable in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
because those things didn't resonate with him. And for years, some of the best-selling books have been self-help and, how to make things happen kind of books.
Yeah.
So it made me wonder how many people out there are accessing these kind of standard books for how to be and feeling even less okay with who they are as a result.
Yeah. I mean, my parents met on a retreat for Robert Kiyosaki ran a retreat in Sydney back in the 80s, and he was a rich dad, poor dad. And so,
Ah.
they're all leaving expecting to, then be millionaires and then the failure, oh, like I've been given the tools and I've failed. Like
Mm.
I'm not a millionaire. Um, yeah, and I think Mike's experienced a lot of that, not so much with wanting to be a millionaire, but that would be all right. But you can read that book. But yeah, just the sense of and I know from the ones I've read too, the sense of failure of like the steps are laid out for me. They've told me how to do it, and I can't do it,
Mm.
and I've failed, and we're not failing, you know.
No.
Um, he's
Even
not
just the
failed.
idea that there's one particular way to do it, that there could,
Yeah,
it kind of blows my mind when people write a book because the belief that that is a particular way and that that's going to speak to the masses is really interesting to me
mm,
because we're so quickly led to believe that, oh, that person, they've got the answer, they've got it going on for them. If I do what they did, then I'm going to be okay too. But individually, we're all going on our own journeys and having our own unique experiences with which pivot us to whatever we're supposed to be paying greater attention to at the time.
yeah,
So a book doesn't know who I am or what my experiences have been, and they don't know my traumas and they don't know my interests or what lights me up. And the quest for that knowledge is my own and
mm.
will unravel in time.
Yeah. I don't want to be too ranty about society and go on about that too much, but yeah, I think we're starting to become more aware that we're doing the things that we do because we're conditioned to do them, not because we naturally need to do them. And so then, yeah, finding a way to not feel like we're actually just all failing. um, yeah, we're not all failing.
No, no, we're all just humans showing up to do our best damn job of being a human, aren't we? And that was kind of what I loved about Mike's conversation about his childhood as well, because he talked about the fact that he had just found his way. He found his people, he found his interests, and just got on with being who he felt to be and didn't get so caught up in other people's expectations. And
Yeah.
that's a gift and it's pretty unique.
Yeah. And I think that's where I was going with it before, um, was where yeah, we're unpacking that conditioning, right? And then we're looking at the self-help books because we're all feeling like, oh well, I'm not doing it right and I'm not quite there, so I need to change myself. And now it's kind of unpacking that, undoing a lot of that conditioning, and now starting to then as adults accept, oh no, I'm actually not a failed thing off the production line. It's actually, this is the beautiful thing about being a human is that we're all different and all flawed and all skilled in different ways, um and yeah, it's lovely to see a bit of a shift in embracing that more rather than how to model yourself more and change yourself more to fit kind of this one way of doing things, which it's definitely been um, what I've seen in Mike. So
I loved just then when you were talking, I had this like visual of like, the 50s, all the men in their suits that all look the same with their briefcases, all the same, like getting public transport to get to their job, all going to their offices. And that was, the streets, everyone looked the same on the streets, everyone did the same thing, everyone went to work at the same time, everyone came home at the same time. They came home to this particular way of the home being, with the woman dressed in a particular way, with the food on the table, all of that kind of stuff. And we've really, like now, when you imagine people heading to work and people coming home at the end of the day, they're very different images because
Mm.
we've really stepped into this idea that it can look different for everybody. And there's still too much of the 9 to 5 for me, but people are going to work in their own, ways of doing that. We're riding, scooting, driving, catching public transport, whatever that needs to look like, dressed in whatever we want to wear, and often coming home to this chaotic experience in the
Yeah.
evening.
And like heavily tattooed doctors and nurses and the
Yeah.
different ethnicities and hair colors. And, it's not unusual these days to go out and see someone with, blue or bright pink hair. Like,
Yes.
just those little, yeah. Um,
This invitation of expressing ourselves that's growing
mm, mm,
and still
yeah.
growing and certainly still has work to be done. And we know this, that there's still parts of society that would really like to shut that down. But the fact that it is becoming more common and seen more often, and that those individuals feel able to step forward in that way, and I would hope majority of the time feel safe enough to do that, it fills me with hope,
Mm.
optimism.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Sorry, didn't mean to turn this into a big lecture on society. And
No, it's always interesting where we go, isn't
I
it?
know, I wasn't, yeah.
It's a problem for me at the moment. I'm on a bit of a soapbox. So I'm having to step down off it in every conversation I'm in because it's pouring out of me very easily. But to
Something that
say
you're
that
feeling.
all of our conversations, all of the people we've spoken to, all of the opportunities we've had to hear from our beautiful guests so far have caused me to reflect on the bigger picture and
Mm,
what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. It's been a big, and we've already said this a couple of times at the start of the podcast of this episode, but there's a big why for me and currently and asking myself why. And that has really formed through some of these recordings and conversations. So it's not surprising that at this point we've got this kind of bigger thinking about things and we're starting to question our own reasons for doing what we do every day. And
absolutely.
I'm so excited that our guests, that our listeners are going to get that experience as well
Yeah.
as we
No,
release the episode.
it definitely has been one of those experiences to challenge and really examine and pick apart why your why. And yeah, some things after reflection, I feel so much more strong and staunch in my why. And other things I'm like, oh, yeah, why? Why am I doing that? Yeah. I'm also sitting my entire family down, well, the three of us, and making them work out their like whys and everything tonight. So my daughter's just rolling her eyes at me like, oh my God, Mum, I can't believe you're making me do this. But yeah, why? Why do we live where we live? Why do we, do what we do? Why do we? Hmm,
That's big questions,
big
big
questions.
ponderings and reflections. And I think as a reminder, before you head into that activity tonight, how we said at the beginning of this that our perspectives can change and shift. That means our whys can change and shift. And we don't need to be stuck in any decision that we make, allowing for time to process and consider and make choices and ponder on the why. Sometimes we can't just answer why. We actually need time and space to process that question and think about it in different ways. Why can be too big of a question to start with. Sometimes we have to break it down, think about what we love, think about
Hmm.
what helps us feel really safe and held and lights us up. Because we
Brings
all
us joy.
brings us joy. Yeah.
Hmm.
And in the same time, sometimes it's useful to reflect on the places that don't, that do the
Hmm.
opposite of that, so that we can get a strong sense. It's interesting. I've always found nature to be a really great grounder for me, but never ever have I had that so strongly evidenced than when I visited New Zealand
Mm.
about a year ago. And as you know, New Zealand is the most spectacular place.
Mm.
And we had been traveling for about just over a week through the South Island. And we'd gone really, really deep south, right down the bottom into, forest where there was, sea lions on the beach. It was phenomenal, like the animal life that existed in that world. And there were very few people. We discovered that it wasn't an area that a lot of tourists went. They all tended to stay up near Queenstown and, go to some of the closer by places, but not as many went that deep. And actually, the tourists that we did find down that way tended to be North New Zealand people that were traveling and wanted to go deep south. So we'd been doing this incredible journey through these just incredibly breathtaking and so nature-based days. And then we were traveling into Queenstown, and the intention was to spend the last 4 days in Queenstown and stay in Queenstown and then do, some of the more adrenaline and touristy type stuff. So we've driven into Queenstown, and the first thing that happened was that we arrived into a line of cars. Just cars were stopped. There was too much traffic. And suddenly, for the first time in a week, there's this massive sense of there being other people in the world.
Mm.
And I just immediately went, oh my gosh, people. Oh my gosh, look at them all. What are all these cars? Oh, there's buildings. Like it absolutely just shocked me. And then we got to our accommodation, which was gorgeous. Everything in New Zealand is gorgeous. Like, I love New Zealand. But we got to our accommodation and it was like a backpackers. And so there was all these people and it was up on the top of a hill and I could see the whole of Queenstown. And I just went, can't, I can't do this. I felt so beautifully connected to myself for the whole of the trip. And suddenly I feel really out of my body. I feel really agitated and I feel really uncomfortable. And probably I would say every other time that something like that has happened to me, I have pushed through, sucked it up, gone, she'll be right. Let's just do the thing. And I've never, ever, ever not stayed somewhere that I've booked and paid for. But I, after about half an hour at this accommodation, I started being like, how are we going to not stay here? Like, I cannot stay in this accommodation. And it was really tricky because I was, with other people and they'd contributed to the cost. And I didn't know whether I could totally take this on board or not. But my daughter was with me and she was having the same reaction that I was. And my partner at the time would have sucked it up, totally would have sucked it up and said, this will do. But I just, for the first time ever, said, I'm not staying here. I don't care that I've paid for it. I don't care that I'm going to lose my money. This sounds very privileged. I don't care that I'm going to have to pay for accommodation somewhere else. But I'm not staying in this town where there are all these people and it is so full. I just want the rest of my experience to not feel like this. And so
Mm.
we found accommodation in Arrowtown, 20 minutes out of Queenstown. And after one night in Queenstown, moved to that location. And the immediate experience of getting there and going, like,
Mm.
this is where I'm meant to be. It's quiet. There's a hot tub in the backyard. There's no people around. It was just beautiful. So it's interesting how we can have these experiences in our life that show us so clearly what our body loves, but it's so easy to ignore them.
Mm.
And I spent so much of my life telling myself that I didn't need nature, I didn't need all of these things, that I was too busy, there's no time to make the effort to do all of that. But I'm a completely different person when I get to be outside and in nature. And I still think back to that experience regularly because it's such a stark reminder for me of what listening to my body feels like, looks like, and the impact.
Yeah. And it's not an easy thing to start listening, where I just think about my whole life I've just stuffed things down and ignored them and pretended that they didn't exist because it was easier or safer to go along with everything else. And this year I'm really working on that. That's my main thing that I'm working on this year. And my sister-in-law said to me this morning a quote that I will not betray myself for the comfort of others. And that's my motto this year. Who hopefully she will join us at some point throughout the year. I'm trying because she's amazing. But that's just starting to pay attention and listen to those little niggles, and so brave to move your family from your accommodation and be like, nah, this isn't working for me. Like, it's a big call and it's awesome, and you've probably all benefited from that.
Yeah, totally. Well, let's leave that for our first reflection conversation. I can't wait to have many more of these and see how many rabbit holes we go down.
I know. I'm surprised where we went today.
Which is actually, that's been true of every recording we've had, isn't it? Like even when we have our guests on, we don't script anything. We just come on with a curiosity of this person and see where that leads us. And it has led us to some of the most profound and exciting and confronting and unexpected conversations.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So we continue to record, we continue to meet people and find people that want to come on and have conversations with us. If you are one of those people, please feel free to get in touch. Emily is much better at telling you how to contact us.
Send us an email, beyondtheneurotype@gmail.com, or you can flick us a message on Instagram or Facebook, and or reach out in the comments on YouTube or Spotify.
And please let us know. We really would love to know how these conversations sit with you, any thoughts and feelings that you have. We have genuine curiosity about the people that are hearing us and that we are reaching, and we want to know about you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks so much for today, Kate, and can't wait to catch up again soon.
Yeah. Bye.
For more information on today's conversation and guest, head to the links provided in the description. Please like and subscribe to keep up to date with more content, and it helps us out with the algorithm too. Beyond the Neurotype is not a licensed medical or mental health service, and any information or advice given is general in nature. Please seek professional help if anything mentioned in today's episode has raised questions or concerns.